NABN, New Africa Broadcasting Network.
Professor Kingsley Moghalu, a world-renowned political economist and former senior United Nations diplomat, has called on federal government of Nigeria to stand firmly behind Mr. Akinwumi Adesina, the embattled president of African Development Bank. The former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria made this call during an interview with NABN TV special correspondent Arthur Ejiofor recently.
My advice, and I've already given some advice to the government, but quietly, I did not do it publicly. I think the Nigerian government has to stand up for Akinwumi Adesina. This is the politics of international organizations. I was very, very pleased to see President Obasanjo release in a very quick and timely way a letter to various African leaders or former heads of states and so on, making the case that there are some allegations against the gentleman. These allegations have been investigated by the authority and the mechanism set up by the African Development Bank itself, and he has been cleared of the allegations. And this is an organization of African countries. Although it has some foreign shareholders, Nigeria is the biggest shareholder. Now, so there are implications for how this matter is handled. And so if Adesina had been found guilty of the allegations against him, it would be another matter. You see what I'm saying? You could say, okay, maybe he should issue an apology, or maybe he should step down, or whatever. But to the extent that the body set up by the African Development Bank has investigated him and cleared him of each and all those allegations, then I think there is a problem for Africa and for Nigeria if they were to allow external influence to determine the outcome of this matter completely. Because it means that the African countries, there are implications for their sovereignty. There are implications for their own ability to control an organization that was set up in 1964 by African countries. So let us watch and see how the matter, but the Nigerian government should vigorously mount a diplomatic campaign across the continent and across the Western powers, even to those countries that are pushing against Adesina. The Nigerian government should go to them and make a case why they should drop their opposition to his re-election, from what we can see.
Speaking about recession and the effect of COVID-19 on Nigerian economy, the former Nigerian presidential candidate 2019 believes that it's time for Nigeria to look more into foundational revenue rather than depending on oil.
Every prosperous country is based on the foundational revenues raised by taxation. That means a social contract between the state and its citizens. The citizens have to pay their taxes, but they have to know that those taxes are being used for their welfare. But our reliance on oil has, of course, been our undoing. When you export raw commodities or natural resources, and if anything happens to the demand for those natural resources, your revenues and your cash flow will crash. And that's what has happened to us, and it has happened several times. But with COVID, it's happened even worse because the depression in global demand, as many industrialized countries shut down because of the pandemic. So, of course, the price of oil crashed. It was already having a problem with the price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. And then COVID just was a double whammy. So our economy is not well managed. It's not even well conceived, not to talk about being well managed. So we've run Nigeria for 60 years, and the last 50, I think, on the basis that oil is what will drive our revenue, our pocket. And of course, when the price of oil sneezes, Nigeria catches pneumonia. So we have a lot of unemployment. People, because of the lockdown, a lot of people have lost their jobs and their livelihoods. The government is stressed, fiscally because it doesn't have the kinds of revenues that it was expecting. So there is a massive economic crisis and a recession looming. We should look at our economic problems in a very fundamental way. And post-COVID, Nigeria needs a fundamental response to the COVID crisis. And I argue that that response should not be the kind of surface things we see. All this borrowing that Nigeria is doing. Nigeria is borrowing a lot from the IMF and the World Bank, like several other countries, by the way, but that's not going to solve our problem. We need to fundamentally reposition our economy. Number one, I have argued that Nigeria's budget for 2020 should be almost completely repurposed to fighting the COVID crisis. That means that at least 50% of the budget should be recalibrated to supporting small businesses, supporting citizens. But this has not happened. I also think that from all the money they're borrowing, I've recommended that at least $500 million should be taken out and used to establish a public-private partnership venture capital fund that will train unemployed youth, unemployed Nigerians in the urban slums and in rural areas with skills, and give them equity capital to start new businesses. This way, you are addressing the problem at its foundation, because the foundation is the absence of investment in human capital. We need to invest a lot more in healthcare, in the healthcare system, and in education. So that's also a solution we should put in place. And then finally, we need to perish the whole idea of oil as a source of revenue in our minds and move to a manufacturing economy that creates complex products for export, because that is what builds the wealth of nations. And that is based on innovation, which is a culture that we should develop in the Nigerian economic management system. Nigerians are very innovative people, as we all know. Many of them invent things, they're very inventive, they're very adaptive. But we have not seen this creativity and this inventiveness harnessed as state policy in terms of the management of the economy by creating intellectual property protection for the products of innovation and, commercializing the products of innovation in a systemic way. And this requires both the private sector, the big companies, and the government policy to create the enabling environment. So we need to begin to think to the future. We should not waste the COVID crisis by allowing similar things to happen again in future and catch us napping.
Still on Nigerian economy, Professor Kingsley said Nigerian economy can grow well if Nigerians can patronize and buy made in Nigeria products.
So the question is, how do you encourage local manufacturing and local industry? The best way to do that is to use the tariff regime. And that is that you place high tariffs on things that are imported and create an enabling environment for the things that are locally manufactured. I say that you can import toothpicks if you want to import toothpicks, but let it be very expensive so that only very wealthy people can genuinely afford foreign toothpicks. That way, every ordinary person in Nigeria that wants to buy a toothpick will buy Nigerian manufactured toothpicks. That's just it. If you say you're banning this or you're banning that, what it does is that it creates artificial scarcity, and smuggling will fill the gap. So there's a need to use trade policy. And Nigeria hasn't done that, whether it is through the World Health Organization. Now you have the African Continental Free Trade Area. And if we do not strengthen our domestic manufacturing, our market will be swamped by goods produced in other parts of the continent, whether genuinely produced by Africans or by foreigners who have come and set up shop in other African countries in order to invade the Nigerian market. So yes, I think we need to very, very fundamentally review our trade policy and exploit every loophole that we can. For example, there's a lot of dumping in the Nigerian market of goods from China, many of them sub-quality. Why is this? It is because we have compromised ourselves in our relationship with China, and so we're not able to stand up when you're proposing to take $17 billion of loans from China, it's not going to be easy for you to say you cannot dump goods in our country. It's not going to be easy for you to go to the World Trade Organization's settlement mechanism and sue China for breaching international trade rules. So these are the things. We need leadership with a completely altered worldview. You have to have global strategic intent. And that calls for intellectual capacity, it calls for vision, and it calls for consistency in terms of application and making use, of course, of the best hands possible in the country. We have a political leadership class that has only focused on taking care of themselves, but not on managing Nigeria's economy for prosperity for everyone. This is what has happened. If the political leadership, the reason why I ran for president in 2019 was because even though as a central bank governor, as a deputy governor of the Nigerian Central Bank, I made a very strong contribution to the economic success that we achieved at that time. But I recognized that ultimately it is the political leadership that creates the environment for whether a country can succeed or fail.
On Nigerians in Diaspora, Kingsley said the federal government should create an enabling environment for Nigerians in diaspora to invest in Nigeria.
I had a chapter where I talked about the diaspora. And I said that, by the way, that book is available on Amazon, Build, Innovate, and Grow, big. I would say to them, go and look at China, look at India, look at Israel. These are countries that, like us, have a lot of people in the diaspora. But look what they have done with their people in the diaspora, because they created policies and environments that welcomed the return of those diasporans to create a lot of value and bring in skills back home. But we need to do this in a structured manner and in a systematic manner. If I were president of Nigeria, for example, I would undertake a very clear audit of all Nigerians living abroad, where they are, their population, their skills. I would create a structure, a fund for the diaspora to enable them to come back home. And for 5 years, we would subsidize their income if that income is, as you would expect, lower than what they were earning abroad. But there will be a plan for what each individual will bring in. What sector are you going into? The health sector? Are you going into the electricity sector? Are you going into the education sector? So there will be clear benchmarks for what you're bringing back into the system for 5 years. If after 5 years you want to stay on, that subsidy will end. But if you now want to stay on, you can stay on. If you want to go back to where you came from, that's okay, but you have added a lot of value to the system. So there needs to be a strategy for diaspora engagement and diaspora return. It's not enough to just come and say to people, just come home and serve your country. I was in the diaspora when I was invited back to become deputy governor of the central bank. I did not even know there was a vacancy. And I was pleasantly surprised. But that's because the people, the governor, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi at the time, was looking for a certain profile to recommend to the president who would do the appointment. I was appointed by the president, but I was recommended by Governor Sanusi at the time. So we have to have people who know what they need and what they're looking for. It's not enough to create a diaspora commission and issue statements when Nigerians are not being treated well and things like that. That's okay. But what is the strategy for tapping the vital resource of the diaspora? Sending $20-something billion every year. That's okay, but that's survival money. Survival money does not create economic transformation. Survival money does not create wealth. They're simply helping their families to survive. And that's okay, but I say is not enough. So Nigeria needs to recognize that although we have a lot of talent at home, we cannot transform Nigeria without the very active engagement of the Nigerian diaspora. We should stop allowing our talents to be exported abroad and used to develop other countries. You've talked about Adebayo Gundesi. Yes, he cannot do in Nigeria what he has done in all these countries. But it is because those countries have created the enabling environment. The government is not in charge of everything. You can do private concessions, you can do private contracts and buy an infrastructure facility. Do you see what I'm saying? So now, diaspora voting. I am not involved in partisan politics at this time, and I don't belong to any political party. I don't know what the future will bring, but my experience in politics showed me a number of things about the system. And I felt that one of the major problems is the electoral system. The electoral system is fundamentally rigged. It's not a transparent system, and the outcomes that it brings are highly open to question. And I have, so I convened a group called To Build a Nation, and we are campaigning on a non-partisan basis to build a nation, TBAN, and you can go to our website to buildanation.org, and you can join us if you're interested in this advocacy and this campaign for us to build a different Nigeria. And one of the things we're calling for is electoral reform, and that includes diaspora voting within the next 7 years. I don't know if practically Nigerians abroad can vote by 2023. I doubt it, but we certainly must fight for Nigerians abroad to be able to vote in Nigerian elections by the 2027 elections for sure. We have 7 years to achieve it. And it's going to take a lot of work, but I feel we should do that work.
Professor Kingsley said that Nigerian youths should see themselves as leaders of today, but not tomorrow.
There are two visions about the role of youth in any society. One vision was the one given by Benjamin Disraeli, a former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who said that the youth are the guarantors of a nation's posterity, of a nation's future. Then there's another vision, I think it was said by a wisecrack by Edgar Hoover in this country, in the United States, I think the founding director of the FBI, who said, "Blessed are the youth, for they will inherit the national debt." That's a very sarcastic way of saying that the youth are important, but the future that awaits them depends on what we have done today. Now, the young people of Nigeria can shape the future of Nigeria if they want to. They have the numbers, but so far, we have not seen them able to use those numbers in a way that can bring about change. That is because their value system needs to be a bit realigned. They need to begin to think differently. They need to be able to understand what matters and not just enjoying the social media or the Big Brother Nigeria shows of the moment and investing their money to have temporary fun. They can invest their whatever little money they have to change the system that is holding them down today. When we talk about youth, I don't believe somebody should be president of Nigeria simply because he or she is a youth. That is not a qualification. You have to have the relevant experience, you have to have the relevant capacity, you have to have the relevant ability to do the job. But there is a need for the youth to be a very strong part of the political structure, because every society must regenerate itself or decline. If a society is led by the same people for 40, 50 years, you find that new ideas may not be able to come up because those people are thinking, about in a way that is just decades back. So our young people, and when I ran for president, my appeal was to them to say, look, when we talk about the new breed, It's not just so much a matter of age, but we're talking about new thinking. So it's not so much the physical age of somebody, but it's about the age of your ideas. So, but a lot of the youth today are unemployed. And because they're unemployed, they are economically, cash strapped. But they can still make a difference if they want. It is not aluta continua that will change Nigeria. It is the youth coming together behind somebody who actually has the capacity to change the economy. Somebody who has the technocratic ability, who understands economics, who can manage the economy, who has a vision for Nigeria and a vision for young people to be part of government, those of them who are competent. And so I say to the young people today, there are three ways you can go, and you must go. You must join structural politics. You must become part and members of political parties. Number two, you must come out and vote so that your votes can speak for you. Number three, those of you who feel able to can contest for office. There was a new law passed, not too young to run bill, we call it. And a lot of the youth became excited. And immediately every one of them wanted to run for governor and senate and president. And then they started complaining about the price of the form, the electoral form. So jumping straight to just contesting for election, when you are not a structural part of the political system, is folly. You will not get very far. So the youth should become members. They should go into the PDP, they should go into the APC, they can form new parties or join the newer parties, whatever. But they must make their numbers felt in a number of political parties for them to be able to influence. And that is if they don't sell out to the big and old politicians who have money and give them, just a pittance, and they start hailing them. They start campaigning for their grandfathers to be president because they gave them money. So there's need for a change in the way our young people think. They must become part of structural politics. They must vote and not allow anything to stop them from voting. And they can campaign for office. But right now, they should be part of a strong campaign for electoral reform so that all our votes can count in the future elections in Nigeria.
Kingsley Moghalu is a global leader who has made contributions to the stability, progress, and wealth of nations, societies, and individuals across such domains as academia, economic policy, banking and finance, entrepreneurship, law, and diplomacy. As Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria from 2009 to 2014, he led the execution of extensive reforms in the Nigerian banking system after the global financial crisis. He was a member of the bank's Monetary Policy Committee that brought inflation down into single digits. As professor of international business and public policy at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University in Massachusetts, USA, he has taught, trained, and inspired graduate students from more than 40 countries in North America, Europe, Africa, and Asia, men and women who will go on to leadership roles in their countries in careers from business to government service, from nonprofits to military intelligence. Kingsley served as the chairman of the boards of directors of the Nigerian Export-Import Bank, Nexum, and the Financial Institutions Training Center. He was also a member of the boards of directors of the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Securities and Exchange Commission of Nigeria, the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, and the Global Alliance for Financial Inclusion, AFI. He is the founder and CEO of Sogato Strategies, LLC, a global strategy, risk, and macroeconomic advisory firm that has helped multinational corporations, global banks, private equity, and asset management corporations make successful investments in emerging market countries. Kingsley previously worked for the United Nations for 17 years, leading successful work in national reconciliation and nation building in fractured societies, risk management, and management reform in the UN, and raising billions of dollars for social investments in developing countries by the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and malaria in Geneva. A visionary thinker and thought leader, he is the author of several books, an international keynote speaker at industry conferences, and a frequent commenter in the global media including CNN, BBC World TV, Bloomberg, and the Financial Times. A philanthropist, Kingsley founded the Isaac Moghalu Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provides support for literacy, educational institutions, and access to education for underprivileged children in rural communities in Nigeria.
NABN TV, inspiring a new generation.